that is urgently needed to inform diplomatic missions and inform diplomatic engagement and policy action. Over the past time or over the past period, our team and partners have been working to document patterns of starvation and deprivation in Gaza as a result of siege and destruction, collect testimonies that reflect the lived experiences behind the statistics, and analyze how these practices amount to collective punishment and a weapon of genocide and grave violations of international humanitarian and human rights law. For MIFTAH, this work is part of a broader effort to support international accountability mechanisms, inform diplomatic conversations, and ensure that Palestinian voices and data from the ground are integrated into policy debates after the ceasefire. This discussion is therefore not only about humanitarian relief, but about rights and responsibilities and practical and political will. We hope today's exchange and discussion will help strengthen calls for unhindered, sustained humanitarian access and reconstruction, encourage the integration of famine prevention and accountability into diplomatic agendas and resolutions, and also support a shift from a short-term emergency intervention to a long-term structural solutions that address the root causes of occupation or the root causes of Gaza vulnerability, including occupation, blockade, and systematic de-development. We are deeply grateful for your engagement and for the efforts many of you already undertaken in your official capacities. We invite you to consider how the findings and recommendations will be presented today can be translated into concrete diplomatic initiatives, policies, and coordinated action to ensure that starvation is never used as a weapon and that Palestinians in Gaza can live with dignity and security. Thank you once again for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I'd now like to hand it over to Sarat Khatib, who is MIFTAH's WPS Fellow and part of our international advocacy team.
Welcome again, all of you. The report that we are launching today and the work that we have been doing has been focused on collecting testimonies from women and girls. The final report has tens of testimonies collected from these women. What we've tried to do is look for trends or patterns in these testimonies that indicate what we are looking at is actually systematic and not a specific incident. I should start where Dr. Tahrir just ended, is that what we have seen in how famine has spread in the Strip is actually an additional show of how this is the result of man-made policies. These include siege that was ongoing for 17 years prior to the genocide, including siege, destruction of food system, aid obstruction, and militarization of relief, which we have seen through the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. So what we looked at essentially is the conditions that have helped create the famine in the first place. Things like a total blockade on food, water, fuel, medical supplies, as well as the destruction of objects needed for survival of the community. These included farmlands, bakeries, water wells, as well as community markets. We have seen the targeting of civilians throughout the period of the genocide, specifically at these aid distribution sites, with hundreds recorded killed at these sites while waiting for food. Additionally, the exclusion of UN agencies, specifically the UNRWA, from aid distribution have led to these mass killings that we have seen. specifically at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site. I think that what added to this is the economic restriction that we have seen, specifically the blocking of cash entry, which led to the collapse of the whole banking system, with an inflation of 1,400%. When we look at the report, we attempt to link it to the legal frameworks on the international level. So we refer to the Fourth Geneva Convention, particularly Articles 55 and 59, as well as CEDAW, CRC, and most importantly, IHL in its prohibition of collective punishment of a people. The evidence of the ground and the patterns that we have seen through these testimonies can be shortly put as first, mothers describing themselves as skipping meals constantly, most of them on a daily basis, to be able to provide food for their children. We have also seen pregnant and breastfeeding women suffering anemia, miscarriages, premature births, and explaining in these testimonies what that actually means on a psychological and personal level for themselves as women, and then for themselves as part of the community and their families. We have also seen a lot of description on the use of unsafe substitutes for food. In many cases, this was animal food or grass. Specific brands have come up that are common. Additionally, a lot of women described the pushing and the beating, being shot at these aid distribution sites. So even actively trying to pursue getting to food and aid was harsh. On a psychological level, in the vast majority of these testimonies, we have seen women describe guilt and the feeling of being disconnected from their families and children. So I would like to link that and go deeper into the gendered aspects of starvation, how we looked at them. So what we have seen is that women describe themselves as bearing the double burden of not only being caregivers and being deprived of that role in their families and communities, but also as being affected individuals themselves by the famine. So as I mentioned, 90% of pregnant and nursing women are malnourished. We have seen an increase in domestic violence, stress, and exploitation during famine. Women have described that their bodies are used as a bargaining chip to exchange for food. Additionally, on a gendered aspect, we have seen the erosion of roles. A lot of mothers have described how their relationship with their children has shifted from them constantly asking their parents for food, specifically mothers, to then themselves stopping this and them themselves seeking food outside. So one of the testimonies that comes to mind is a mother that said that at one point her 4-year-old child stopped asking for food and just left the tent and started looking outside. And I believe that this erosion of the role of motherhood not only influences the child and how they perceive their caregiver, but also a mother and in their motherhood. We have also, on the same note, seen how this affects the mental health. Children have seen to be reflecting the mental health situation of their mothers. So mothers that described that they were depressed because they were unable to provide food and necessary materials have said that their children were not only influenced directly by the deprivation of food, but also with their mothers suffering mentally from that load. So we have seen it reflected in children as well. A lot of mothers in their testimonies have also described that even if they do get their hands on some type of food, preparing that food in itself has become a struggle. Most of them could not reach a fire to start cooking, which they describe as an identity breach. A lot of them have resorted to using plastic, nylon, toxic materials, which have created physical hazards not only for themselves, their children, but also for the community as a whole. The loss of identity, I think, for us reviewing the testimonies has begun that most of the testimonies begin in the same manner, where these mothers, women, and girls recall their life before the genocide, describing a home, describing their kitchen, describing their children going to school and coming back from school. And then they go through the 2 years of genocide and how this relationship has shifted from their children no longer telling them about their days, no longer explaining what they're suffering, no longer asking them for things, So I think that there is this shift in identity and what it means to be a Palestinian mother in Gaza that has been very clear in these testimonies, and how many of them have said that once you are a mother, it is very hard to imagine yourself not being one. But what the genocide has done is that it has made me witness myself unbecoming a mother. And I think I remember, at least in a number of testimonies, we have read the unbecoming a mother feeling, and I think it comes from that being deprived of the ability to do the basic thing as a parent, as a mother, which is to provide for your children. I think you can link it to other.
I think before we go on, we are going to play a video that we produced at MIFTAH that highlights many of the testimonies that we received this year. So Ahmed.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ellen?
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Want some though, obviously.
Oh, no, I thought I could take advantage of your presence and get some.
Charles, yeah, Ahmed, check.
During Israel's ongoing genocide on Gaza, Palestinians have been facing not only direct bombardment, but also starvation, as aid has been weaponized by Israel. MIFTAH's field workers collected testimonies from women in Gaza facing starvation, who detail the horrors they and their families have been facing under this forced famine.
أعيش اليوم حربين لا حربا واحدة، حرب القصف والدمار وحرب الفقر والجوع والمرض. لقد أصبح الحق في الغذاء مجرد حلم بعيد. صمودي مستمر، لكنه صمود مشروط بالألم والمعاناة.
غالباً ما أتناول وجبة واحدة فقط في اليوم، وأحياناً لا أتناول شيئاً. تدهورت صحتي الجسدية والنفسية، وبدأت أعاني من ألم مستمر في الساقين وضعف عام ودوخة، إضافة إلى ازدياد عصبيتي وتوتري بشكل يومي.
بعد شهرين من انقطاع الطعام والخبز والطحين، أعطتني حماتي 4 أرغفة خبز من أجل تجهيز الفطور للأطفال، حيث أعطي كل طفل نصف رغيف محشو بالعدس المحمص. عندما شاهد ابني الصغير الخبز، قال: يا رب ينزل صاروخ كل أهلي يموتوا مشان أضل لحالي وأكل الخبز لحالي وأشبع.
أشاهد أطفالي يتغيرون، ضحكاتهم اختفت، لا يطلبون طعاماً، بل فقط ينظرون إلي بعينين غارقتين بالخوف. ابنتي ذات ال10 سنوات قالت لي مرة: ماما، لو متنا هل سنجد في الجنة خبزاً؟ لم أجد رداً، فقد حضنتها وبكيت.
بعد ولادتي بأسبوعين فقط انتهت الهدنة، وعادت الحرب من جديد، ومع اشتداد القصف بدأت الجمعيات تقلل توزيع المساعدات. أنا أم مرضعة وطفلي لا يشبع من الرضاعة الطبيعية، ويحتاج إلى حليب صناعي، لكنني لا أستطيع تأمينه.
نفسيتي محطمة، أشعر بأنني عبء على ابني، لا أستطيع النوم ولا الحركة ولا حتى البكاء. كل ما أريده هو أن تتوقف هذه الحرب وأن أتمكن من شراء دوائي وأرى أحفادي يأكلون خبزاً ساخناً مثل باقي البشر.
ازدادت المعاناة حيث انقطاع المساعدات على منطقة شمال غزة وغزة. اضطررنا لإطعام أطفالنا بديلاً للدقيق ما يعرف بآلاف الحيوانات. نجمع باقي الأشياء المبعثرة على الرمال مثل الأرز والعدس وغيرها، وتم إيجاد بدائل لقصة الدقيق مثل عجن المعكرونة والعدس والأرز وغيرها.
لم أكن مهيئة للنزوح من مكان لآخر أنا وطفلي. مع عدم توفر الطعام لجأنا إلى كثير من الطرق البديلة، أكل الأعشاب والنباتات البرية التي يكثر انتشارها بالمقابر، بالإضافة إلى تحويل أعلاف الحيوانات إلى دقيق رغم خطورتها، ولكن لا بديل.
أصعب شعور في الدنيا هو عندما يطلب ابني أو ابنتي الأكل ولا أملك أي شيء لأقدمه لهم.
أغلقت المعابر بالكامل وتوقفت المساعدات الإنسانية من غذاء ودواء وطحين. اضطررت لاستخدام معكرونة مطبوخة وملقاة أمام تكية قديمة، جففتها وأعدت تشكيلها كخبز. جميع أطفالي يعانون من فقر الدم، سوء تغذية وهشاشة عظام، ولا أستطيع تأمين احتياجاتهم الأساسية.
أحياناً يتنازل زوجي عن وجبته من أجلنا، وأحياناً أتنازل أنا لأنني لا أحتمل أن أرى أطفالي ينامون جوعى.
لقد قمت بوضع حبوب الحساسية في المياه، وقمت بإعطائها لأطفالي ليناموا ولا يسألونني عن الطعام.
كنت أعتمد على أحفادي الصغار الذين يسيرون يومياً مسافات طويلة تصل أحياناً إلى 15 كيلومتراً للحصول على وجبة واحدة فقط، وقد يعودون أحياناً خاليي الأيدي.
تعرض ابني الأوسط لحروق بالغة في قدمه جراء انسكاب طعام التكية عليه. يومها اضطررنا لطلب بعض الطعام من الجيران. أما ابني الصغير فيعاني من إصابة ببطنه من العدوان الإسرائيلي على غزة عام 2014، حيث اضطر الأطباء لإجراء عملية إزالة الأمعاء واستبدالها بأمعاء بلاستيكية. مع قلة الغذاء أصبح ابني يعاني من آلام شديدة في البطن، فمن شروط الأمعاء البلاستيكية أن تكون ممتلئة على الدوام.
الصغير يبكي دون دموع، والكبير لا يتكلم ولا يضحك. أصبحوا أولادي مثل النباتات اليابسة، يلتفون على أنفسهم ويرتجفون ليلاً من الجوع والخوف. أما أنا فتغيرت تماماً ولم أعد قادرة على النهوض. وفي يوم من الأيام فقت من النوم، وجدت ابنتي الصغيرة تمسح على وجهي بمنديل مبلل وتقول: يا ماما لا تموتي، بدي أضل بحضنك. واليوم أتحدث وأنا تحولت إلى ظل إنسانة أردد بيني وبين نفسي كل يوم: سأبقى فقط يوما آخر، لعل العالم يسمعنا.
Um, I'd like to first just start by saying that this is a very small fraction of the testimonies that we've collected. We have pages and pages more, and this is just a small fraction of the experiences that Palestinians in all of Gaza have been facing. At the height of famine, it was at catastrophic levels, affecting nearly everyone in the Gaza Strip. Now, I'd like to just take a moment to take a macro level view of what's been happening in Gaza. At MIFTAH, over the past 2 years, we've collected testimonies and conducted reports on a variety of topics. I want to highlight three that I think really tied together really closely. And that's our report on sexual violence, our report on reproductive genocide, and our latest report on starvation. While we collected these testimonies on these three topics at different periods throughout the genocide, all of these violations were happening simultaneously together and continue to happen for many people. And each of these violations reinforces the other. So if you've attended our briefings in the past, or if you've been up to date with our reports, you might have already heard some of what I'm about to say, but just to recap, when we talk about sexual violence, it's a tactic of violence that's been used by the Israeli military against Palestinian women at checkpoints, in their homes, and in Israeli occupation prisons. And it's a type of violence that's been used to control, humiliate, and degrade not only the female victim, but also the male relatives and her family as well. Sexual violence has not been happening in isolated incidents, but it's happening as a matter of military policy. And this has been clear in the consistency in the tactics and the language, which was largely the same across different geographical areas and throughout different military units. Sexual violence is a type of violence that breaks the fabric of Palestinian society from within and controls Palestinians not only physically, but psychologically as well. Moving on to reproductive violence, Palestinian civil society have been calling what's happening in Gaza a genocide from the very beginning, even before the numbers were what they are now. And that's because genocide is declared once certain acts have occurred, regardless of the numbers. The intent for genocide was very clear from the very beginning, with many prominent Israeli leaders and military officials making that clear. One of the acts of genocide, imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group, was also very clear from the beginning. Israel has taken deliberate actions designed to erase the Palestinian population's ability to reproduce and sustain life. This has occurred through Israel's targeting and destruction of the Al-Basma IVF clinic in December of 2023, which destroyed 4,000 frozen embryos. This has happened through the deliberate targeting of women and children, who have made up an overwhelming majority of those killed, through the targeting of schools and tents and hospitals, where predominantly women and children have been sheltering. Reproductive genocide has happened by targeting of neonatal units, of hospitals, and the healthcare infrastructure system as a whole. And reproductive genocide is not only the prevention of births, but also the creating of conditions in which children cannot live and grow. And a big contributor to this is starvation, which is where I will tie in our most recent report on starvation. What Gaza has experienced is not just starvation, however, it has been a famine. Starvation is not only a biological assault on women in particular, but also an assault on their roles in society and on their dignity. Touching on what Sara had said previously, many of the testimonies we collected, women would start, before even talking about their story of what they've been experiencing the past 2 years, they would first start by telling the field workers what their homes were like. They would describe their homes, they would describe the jobs they used to have or what their husbands used to do. And when you read these testimonies, you get the sense that, these women are trying to say, what I am now isn't what I was. I used to have a normal life before this, and all that has been stripped away. Specifically, they talk about their kitchens and the ability to cook, and how being stripped of that ability has stripped them of their roles as mothers and as caregivers for their children. It strips them of the agency and control that they once had. In some testimonies, women would say that they would, as they were displaced in tents, cook on a rudimentary fire on open flame, just some lentils or whatever food they could have, just to reinstill a sense of normalcy for their children, so their children could see that their mother is still cooking for them to the best of her ability. Also, starvation is compounded by repeated displacement. The women that we've collected testimonies from have been displaced an average of 8 times, and many have been displaced 13, 15, up to 17 times. Each time they move, they must part with more and more of their belongings, stripping themselves of who they used to be. And many women are forced to choose between carrying objects such as blankets or tarps, or carrying food. Displacement also isolates women who feel the effects of starvation even more when they aren't being surrounded by the community that they used to be in. Many describe feeling that they've lost the village that they used to live in. Starvation is also compounded by poor sanitary conditions and lack of healthcare infrastructure, leading to the easier spread of diseases. Women in particular are unable to produce breast milk. Pregnant women are having higher rates of miscarriage due to starvation. And many pregnant women have been using prenatal supplements that they received at aid distribution centers as meal replacements, or even as bargaining tokens for food. So just to go back to all three of these violations together, sexual violence isolates women within society. Reproductive violence deliberately targets women because of their role in society. And starvation is a biological attack on women as well as a psychological one. Taken together, these violations are an attack on the female spirit, their role in society, and these attacks ultimately break society for generations to come and make it impossible to recover. We must understand and address these violations as one single system of destruction and control. They are a continuum of gendered warfare designed to erase Palestinian women and with them the continuity of Palestinian life. Now, I'd quickly like to just talk about in this post-ceasefire Gaza that we're seeing, especially given the UN resolution that was voted on Monday. What does this mean for, in terms of the famine in Gaza and aid distribution? So the future of Gaza is as precarious as ever, especially after the UN security resolution voting in favor and backing Trump's plan in Gaza. This plan gives no Palestinian agency or voice in the decisions that directly shape food distribution, humanitarian access, and reconstruction. External governance by a quote-unquote board of peace with no Palestinian representation centralizes power in foreign hands, and these types of structures historically worsen or prolong famines. Conditional, externally defined statehood conditions delays the possibility of Palestinians controlling their own food systems, land management, and economic recovery. As we know, famine does not occur in a vacuum. It emerges where communities lack sovereignty, where movement and resources are controlled by outside powers, and where local governance is undermined. This resolution reinforces a political structure in which Palestinians cannot determine their food systems and where external actors control borders and aid flows. Gaza's famine is inseparable from the structures of occupation and external control that this resolution has now formalized. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker from Gaza, Ahmed Shadian. So joining us now is Shadia Al-Ghul. Shadia is MIFTAH's Gaza branch manager. She holds a master's degree in political science with a specialization in international studies. And she's been working with MIFTAH for nearly 20 years, working on documentation, coordination, and implementing our projects on the ground in Gaza. And it's important to say that Shadia has been an indispensable member of MIFTAH's team. All of our reports and testimonies from Gaza are due to her work in Gaza and the trust that she's built on the ground among women in Gaza. So we're very thankful to her. شادية أنت معنا؟ أهلا وسهلا شادية يعطيك العافية.
الله يعافيكم.
يسلمك.
شادية أنت هيك سامعني؟
نعم.
أوكي تمام. عشان كان في مشكلة في الانتربريتيشن على الزوم، فلو فيك تحكي مع معدل 30 ل 60 ثانية بعدين تعطي بريك لا أقدر أنا أترجم. تمام؟
Yes. طيب، مرحبا للجميع، يعطيكم العافية. صراحة أنا يعني إلي يومين بحاول إنه أنا أحضر لهذا اللقاء، بعدين ارتقيت إنه ما أكتب ولا شيء محضر، وأخلي شهادتي هي شهادة من إنسانة عاشت في الإبادة أكثر ما هي إنسانة اشتغلت في مفتاح. لأنه التقرير اللي بين إيديكم واللي بنعرض صراحة لما كنا بنكتب فيه كان في ذروة المجاعة، وكنا إحنا كأفراد وكباحثين جعانين أول إشي، والجوع كان واصل لمرحلة إنه بلش يظهر على أجسامنا. بمعنى بفترتها أنا كنت ما قبل الحرب 53 كيلو، لما عملت هذا التقرير كان بالضبط 44 كيلو. هذا الوقت اللي فقدت فيه كتير من الوزن تبع جسمي. لما اجينا بدنا نكتب هذا التقرير كانت في عندي قناعة إنه لازم إنه إحنا نعمل هذا التوثيق، بس بنفس الوقت كيف بدنا نعمله وإحنا مش قادرين نطلع، وإحنا مش قادرين نروح ونطاحش ونجري، لأنه ما في وقود، ما في مواصلات، ما في تنقل. وبنفس الوقت وهذا الأهم إنه إحنا جسديا كنا منهكين. وهذا الإنهاك اللي كان على جسدي ما كانش بس إنه في ضعف في الجسم، لا، كان في كمان عنا آلام بالمفاصل، دائما كان في صداع، دائما في عدم تركيز، أحيانا بنصل لمرحلة من العصبية وإحنا مش عارفين ليش معصبين. كتير مرات بتذكر إنه أنا لما كنت بدي أشتغل على هذا التقرير شو بدي أقول
تمام.
للموثقين.
بس فرصة شادية. Hello everyone. I've been trying to prepare for this speech for the past 2 days, and then I decided that I am not going to prepare anything, any written speech. I'm going to just share my story as someone who has lived in Gaza over the genocide and the testimony of someone firsthand. It is important to say that all of the work that we're doing as we were ourselves subjected to these things. We were hungry to a very large extent. All of our team was. I started at 53 kilos and dropped to 44 during the famine. So it was very hard for us to navigate how to document these testimonies and how to reach these people with such a dire humanitarian but also security situation on the ground. This was both tiring physically as well as mentally for us as a team that is facing this personally, not only trying to document it. Yes, Chef.
بالآخر قررنا إنه إحنا لازم نوثق هاي، لأنه قد ما إحنا حكينا وقد ما شفتوا على الإعلام اللي كان على الأرض 1% من اللي كان بيطلع على الإعلام.
Eventually, we decided to document this because whatever you see in the media is only 1% of what's really happening.
مش بس اللي بتشوفوه، اللي كمان أنا بعيشه. يعني أنا موجودة في عائلة فيها أطفال وفيها كبار سن وفيها مرضى كانسر وفيها عينة من كل المجتمع، فأنا كنت
I am in
موجودة
a
في
family
هاي
with
العائلة.
children, with elderly, with persons who have cancer, with actually diverse categories within the society. We're all under one ceiling.
وعشت كيف إحنا كنا نضطر إنه رغيف الخبز الواحد نقسمه وناخد قطعة منه في اليوم كله خلال 24 ساعة.
And I have experienced how we had to share a loaf of bread together, all of us, divide it between us, and have that within 24 hours only, just one loaf of bread to be shared.
وفي مرات كتيرة كنا بضطر إن أنا أستغني عن هذا القطعة تبعتي عشان أعطيها لواحدة من الأطفال أولاد أخويا اللي كانوا موجودين.
And many times I had to not take or would decide not to take my part in order to keep some for my little nephews.
طول الوقت كنت بشرب مي عشان أعبي معدتي وأكون أنا شبعانة.
I used to drink water all the time so that I would fill my stomach and feel a bit full or quench
نفس
my thirst
الحالة
and hunger.
كانت عند الموثقين، عند الباحثين.
Same thing was experienced by the documenters or the researchers.
أنا بتذكر كتير منيح إن الموثقين جزء منهم إحنا كنا بنشتغل معهم ما قبل الحرب. لكن
And I
لما
remember
نيجوا
working with documenters or persons documenting even before the war.
لكن لما اضطريت إن ألتقي معهم عشان نوثق هاي المجاعة أنا ما عرفتهم.
But when I met with them in order for us to document this great hunger, I couldn't really recognize them.
كتير شاحبين، كتير ضعفانين.
They were all pale and thin.
كتير كانوا منهكين نفسيا وجسديا.
And they were physically and psychologically exhausted in light of this famine. Yes.
مع ذلك اضطرينا إنه إحنا نطلع للتوثيق.
Nevertheless, we decided to keep documenting and never stop.
إحدى المرات اتصلت علي موثقة من شمال مدينة غزة.
And one day I received a call by a person who documents things. She's from the north of Gaza city.
قالت لي أنا بحد ذاتي جعانة، أنا حالة، هل
She told
بنفع
me she
زميلي
is
يوثق
herself.
معي؟
She told me she is herself hungry. So like I am so hungry in a famine, but trying to cover a case of famine. So look at the paradox.
وهل هذا الحكي ممكن يكون قانوني وممكن يكون مهني؟
And so she was saying, would this lead to a professional work? And is it even legal? Because she was totally hungry in a famine, but trying to cover that. So she didn't know if the work will come out well.
طلبت منها وصف أكثر عن الحالة اللي هي فيها.
I asked her to explain more her situation. تفضلي.
خبرتني إنه هي إلها أكثر من أسبوع
And she told me that for more than 1 week,
ما أكلت خبز طبيعي.
she did not eat eat normal bread. Did not.
الخبز اللي كان موجود عندها هو خبز معمول من علف الحيوانات.
The bread that she had at her place was made of animal fodder.
وعلف الحيوانات كانت هي محظوظة إنه كان عندهم.
And she was even considered lucky to have some animal feed there, because some people don't even have that.
لأنها هي كانت موجودة في مدينة بيت حنون.
And that's because she was in Beit Hanun.
وكانت إمها بتحب تربي الحيوانات في البيت.
And her mother loved to raise animals at home. So it so happened that because her mother has animals, she had animal feed to create bread from it.
الحيوانات للأسف قتلت بفعل القصف.
The animals were unfortunately all killed there because of the bombardment.
وهي أخذت العلف تبع الحيوانات هذا.
And this lady who was doing the documentation, she's a researcher, took their feed or fodder to use it for herself to survive.
وصنعت من الخبز وأكلته.
Hence, she was creating bread from that fodder, and she was eating that to
هذه
survive.
واحدة من التحديات اللي كانت كتير بتقع علينا إحنا كباحثين في توثيق هذه المعاناة.
This is one of the challenges out of many that we as the researchers were facing and confronting.
مش بس الأكل كان هو المشكلة، كمان المي كانت مشكلة.
Not only food, but water was a great problem.
وهاي للأسف إحنا دايما بنركز على الأكل بس ما ركزنا على المية. يمكن المية ظهرت بعد هيك، بس في فترة ما كانت المجاعة كان برضو في إشكالية في المية.
Unfortunately, some people, when they talk about this famine, they were focusing only on food, and only later did they concentrate or focus on water. But water is not less important.
لأنه كنا بنضطر إنه إحنا نشرب مية كتير عشان نعبي معدتنا وبطننا، بس المي ما كانت موجودة والمية كانت ملوثة.
But that's because we used to drink a lot of water to fill our stomach to survive. But unfortunately, the water itself was contaminated.
اللي بقدر أقول لكم إياه إنه في معجزة إلهية يمكن اتدخلت إنه إحنا لسه ضايلين عايشين رغم إنه في كان وفيات كتير من الجوع.
I would say as follows, that there was divine providence. It is a miracle that we still exist today because so many people died actually.
ما فيش طعام، ما فيش شراب، ما فيش دواء.
No food, no drink, no medicine.
فكيف عايشين؟ هذه أنا ما بقدر أرد عليها.
How did we live? Honestly, I don't find any reasonable explanation behind that.
خاصة الأطفال اللي كنت بشوفهم يوميا.
Especially all the children that I used to see daily.
واللي
their
أبدا مش
troubles.
حيروحوا من ذاكرتي طول حياتي.
I will keep remembering that for the rest of my life, the suffering of these beautiful children.
لما كنا بنضطر ناخد الطنجرة ونروح على أقرب تكية لإلنا ونضلنا 12 ساعة واقفين عشان نحصل على عدس.
For example, how we would take a single pan and go to the Tikkiya, which is a charity house that provides food, and wait 12 hours just to get some lentils.
كتير من المرات كنت بشوف الأطفال وهم غفيانين وقاعدين أو بعيطوا.
Many times within this process, if you may, I used to see the children on the ground crying and powerless.
وكتير التقيت بنساء كانوا قاعدين وبيقولوا لي مضطرين نستنى.
And many women would suffer as well, would have to wait for so long, and they used to complain. And
كنت محظوظة لما
that
بحصل على
was difficult.
حوالي 500 جرام بس من العدس.
I would be considered very lucky to receive about 500 grams of lentils. That was very fortunate.
وبتضطر أنت ترجع وتحط عليها مية عشان تكتر الكمية.
And then you would go back home and add water to it in order to increase the amount or quantity.
تفصيليات كتيرة يعني صعب البني آدم إنه يحكيها صدقوني.
All these horrendous details, honestly, it is really difficult to explain all the things that we have seen.
كل اللي بقدر أقوله إنه إحنا ما خرجنا من شعور المجاعة لحد اللحظة.
All I can say is that we are still in the state of famine until now. We didn't exit it, so to speak.
قبل ساعة بالضبط من هذا اللقاء كنت بحكي مع صديقة فبتقول لي إنه أنا سمنت كتير.
1 hour before this meeting, I was talking to a friend, and she was saying that she got fat.
فبحكي لها مش مهم
I told
لأنه
her
ممكن
that's not
ترجع
important.
المجاعة.
I told her that's not important because the famine might be back soon.
لحد هذه اللحظة هذا الشعور متملك كل الناس.
Until now, this is the sense of the people. This is the sense of that famine and the troubles thereof.
متخوفين إنه إحنا نفقد الأكل مرة تانية ومش واثقين إنه إحنا ممكن ما نفقدوش.
So we are constantly afraid that we might lose food, and we're not taking that for granted because any moment we have that feeling that we would lose it again, lose food, not to have any.
وهذا معكوس حتى على الأطفال.
And this negatively reflects on children as well, which is unfortunate.
الشوكولاتة لما بيشتروها هلقيت الأطفال اتعلموا إنهم يضلهم يقسموا فيها عشان ما تخلص بنفس اللحظة.
When they buy chocolate for children, they have gotten accustomed to distributing and dividing that chocolate to so many bits and pieces so that it wouldn't finish quickly. The
المجاعة
same
ما
chocolate bar.
تركت أثر على جسمنا فقط، كمان تركت على نفسيتنا وعلى روحنا.
The famine not only affected our physical aspect, but on our psychological and spiritual aspects as well. It left a very serious impact.
هذا الانعكاس شفته على النساء اللي كانت بتبكي وهي بتحاول ترضع ابنها.
This negative feeling I saw also among women who were crying while breastfeeding their children under suffering.
شفته بعينين أمي اللي عمرها 75 سنة وبتعاني من الضغط والسكر وما كنتش عارفة إيش أعمل إلها.
And I saw that suffering also in the eyes of my 75-year-old mother who suffers from hypertension, high blood pressure, as well as diabetes. And I didn't know what to do to help her.
فقط كنت اللي بقوله لإلها تنام.
All I could tell her is to sleep.
فقط.
That's all I could do.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadia. We appreciate how hard it is to go through this, but then to talk about it. But we definitely
شكرا أخت
appreciate it.
شادية. نفهم مدى صعوبة التعبير عن هذه الأمور، ونقدر أنه أنت أخرجتي ما في داخلك من معاناة وهذه التجربة الصعبة.
Our next speaker is Mr. Yazdan. He's ANERA's Gaza branch director. He has over 25 years of experience in humanitarian and development sectors in Gaza and the MENA region. Yazdan has managed large-scale programs across a range of sectors, including civil society, livelihoods, health, WASH, education, and emergency response. He holds both an MBA and a bachelor's degree in communication. Yazdan, are you with us? I think you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
مرحبا تحياتي.
Hello, greetings.
أنا موجود. أهلا وسهلا.
Yes, greetings.
It's, because actually I was about to speak in Arabic, just to save time for the interpretation and so forth. I may speak in English, whatever is convenient for the people, and I would like to start with great thank you for having me here today. I'm Yazdan Al-Amawi from Anira. I'm sitting in Gaza right now. And I was actually listening to the previous speakers, colleagues, and Shadia in particular, while she walked us through our daily life in Gaza in a very precise and like telling all the witnesses and the testimonies that we are having on a daily basis. Like Anira is appreciating, while Anira is appreciating the ceasefire that has been put in place in October 9th, still we have a long path to go through based on the overwhelming devastation that we have been through it over the past 2 years of the war. And Anira has been exerting every efforts possible actually to provide aid and to work along with other NGOs and UN agencies to address all the people's in Gaza needs for the difficult days. So it's not going to be solved over a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It's a prolonged process that we should all be aware of the fact that we need really to get all the efforts together to respond and address the needs of the people in Gaza. Anira has health and education programs as well as the aid distribution all over the past 2 years. Particularly while we are addressing the health needs of the Palestinians in the south. This was before the ceasefire. We have treated over than 365,000 patients. And we've been delivering those services under harsh circumstances based on the lack of medication as well as the identification of the proper premises to install our clinics in Khan Yunis, primary health clinics in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah. While the two areas of the Gaza Strip, the north was divided from the south, and we could not do any health services in the north at that time. Like we started the services around April 2024, and we treated over more than 350,000 patients. But around April 2025, the team and the medical team start to realize, based on the lab results of urine, that 40% of the cases are having ketones in the samples, which are indicative of starvation. We've been able actually to deliver some vegetable foods and to mobilize some food to those malnutrition cases. But the demand is huge, and actually we could not really cover everything. So the famine has been like a monster that affected our operation and resulted in lots of incidents that me myself witnessed on the street, and actually like my nephews have suffered of those things, and the grandsons as well. So at the personal level, as Sharia mentioned before, actually we had times of not being able to afford more than like one meal a day or half meal a day. For children, it's extremely harsh and it's unbearable while you are trying to get some food to the kids, but you cannot give them those like nutritional supplies and even anything just to feed them. We have witnessed people fainted in the streets. We have people fainted in the clinics. So we decided actually to put more efforts to try to get some vegetables and any sort of food for those people as a priority. The situation continued to be harsh, and since in March 2nd, we almost were cut off any aids into Gaza. This exacerbated the situation, and we couldn't actually address the need of the people. And this is one of the major challenges that we have faced, like the level of the aid flow into Gaza, and then coupled with complete rejection of any of the food and supplies and commodities come into Gaza. This has created lots of pressure. During the last evacuation in October, actually, we moved our clinics from Gaza, the one that we rebuilt after the January 2024, again to the south area, and tried to mobilize as much as food and supplies into the region between the middle and the south. Right now, we are doing potable water and we are doing vegetables, and we're trying just to get as much as food possibly from the local market to procure and deliver. Although we managed to get like more than 130 million hot meals during the war until like a few months ago, as well as 7 million gallons of water, but still, along with other agencies, the demand is huge. And after the ceasefire on October 9th, what we are receiving is almost one third of what's supposed to get. Actually, we're getting a range of like 200 trucks per day, mainly for UN agencies and for commercial. And this is absolutely is not adequate and enough to address the needs of the people in Gaza, coupled with the harsh weather and all of the conditions that are affecting the family at different levels, particularly women, people with disability, elderly, and the children. So the situation, although we have some alleviation in terms of like food supply recently, but still we are suffering from the prolonged consequences of the famine over the past period of time that we believe it's going to affect the young generation in terms of like maturity and mental stability and mental and cognitive abilities. So we have been through this over more than 2 years now, and we witnessed all of these, whether during our displacement, the repetitive one, or at least, or as humanitarian aid workers who are supplying food and having direct relationship with the people. We, as international agencies and humanitarian workers, are ready actually to supply as much as possible once we are giving the green light to deliver. For instance, in Europe, we have 47 trucks waiting, and we could deploy immediately. I believe most of the INGO and UN agencies, they have thousands of trucks and tons of food and supplies to get it into Gaza as soon as the green light is given to them. So we are calling upon an immediate, like, opening of the crossings, allowing for more aids to be brought into Gaza. This is coupled with lots of difficulties and challenges at the internal level, like even if we get some trucks through UN agencies and some INGOs, but still the routes are not accommodated in a way that ensures that those communities arrive to the people safely, or at least to reach the distribution point. We are calling upon increase the level of coordination to open more crossings, facilitating the movement inside the Gaza Strip to allow the international community to address the food and non-food needs to the people. This is the situation. It's yet, given the ceasefire, still alarming. We do not receive the adequate quantities compared to the before the war, which is supposed to be 600 trucks or so. And according to the deal, we should receive 600 trucks, but we receive 1/3 of the trucks on a daily basis. I hope that the situation improves soon, and we'll be able to mobilize as much as needed of quantities to address the needs of the people at both sides, like at the food and the non-food supplies, as well as being able to get the machinery needed and the spare parts to maintain the desalination units, and to ensure that we have enough quantities of potable water and domestic water reaching the people. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm open actually for any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Yazdan. Do we have any questions from the audience?
All right. Thanks a lot for the briefings. My name is Yvonne, and I'm from the Netherlands Representative Office in Ramallah. So both briefers actually spoke about the quantity of goods that are currently entering Gaza, and that is currently not sufficient. But I'm also curious to hear if you can also speak a little bit about the quality of the goods that are entering. If you look at because already there was a reference made to the fact that the famine-like conditions are still continuing. But if you look at the quality of the goods that are currently available in Gaza, what would then be most needed in order to reverse the famine-like conditions? Thank you so much.
I think in terms of the quantities, they are not inadequate, and definitely this is something that we emphasize that we need to increase it. As far as the quality as well, I think we need to improve quality, although we have some, and the diversity of the items that are allowed, and we do not have like meat protein in enough quantities, and probably quality as well. I'm not an expert, but at least these are connected with the type of reservation, how they save it, how they reserve it. They need electricity, they need high, like refrigerators with adequate power supply, etc. And also we do not receive eggs, for instance. Dairy is not allowed, and the ordinary people, they cannot afford much of the goods that are brought into Gaza through merchants, like through commercial. It's unaffordable because despite the fact that there were some noticeable reduction in price based on the quantity that arriving, yet the normal average people, they cannot afford it. So this is an issue. So allowing like a humanitarian organization and UN agencies, like bringing air, including those items, is much needed at this stage to ensure that we are meeting the nutritional supplies needs for the people. Also, we receive certain items that are lacking, like sometimes they are forced at our community kitchen. For instance, if we have lentils, we have like rice, we have some beans, we continue to do the same thing without having other supplements like food and protein, and to diverse the meals to ensure that we have enough and quality food provided to people.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, I think with that, we will move on to our next speaker. Yazdan, thank you very, very much for joining us and for all the important work that you're doing on the ground in Gaza. I'd next like to introduce our next speaker, Alex Diwal. Alex is the Executive Director of the World Peace Foundation and Research Professor at the Fletcher School, Tufts University. He has worked on famine, conflict, and related issues since the 1980s as a researcher and practitioner. His recent books include The Real Politics of the Horn of Africa, Mass Starvation, The History and Future of Famine, and New Pandemics, Old Politics. Hello, Alex. It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Very early on your end, I know. So thank you for being here.
It's good to be with you. And I was very moved by the report that I watched and heard earlier. And it has so many echoes, so many reverberations from the voices of people who have been through famines and indeed are going through famines around the world. And it articulates, what you have managed to do is to articulate so many of the issues that so often remain unspoken, so often remain silent. So, I mean, as you indicated, this is a topic that I've been studying now for 40 years. And it's something that probes the depths of what it means to be a human being, to be a person. And to listen to the voices of those who endure starvation, we need to be attentive to words like shame, like humiliation, like dignity, like dehumanization. Listen for those words. We need to peel away the shell of those, of the humiliation before the truly hungry can find the words to represent themselves. And I think what you're managing to do is precisely to do that, to compel those who are watching, listening, reading, to understand really that our vocabulary is not sufficient. So in the English language, when people talk about starvation, they usually mean it in an intransitive sense. People are starving as though they are wet because they are caught in a shower of rain, or they are cold because they forgot to take, their winter coat when they left the house. But starvation is actually something that people do to one another. There is a perpetrator, and in the images that we have of the starving, the perpetrator is not represented. In fact, the perpetrator is very often the one who is taking the picture. And the other element that I think is which is what I'm going to dwell on, is that starvation is both biological, and we understand that. I don't need to emphasize that. It's a process of the body undergoing loss of nutrients, etc. But it's also a social process. It is, as it were, weaponizing or turning the biology and the biological urge to survive of the individual against the human spirit, against everything of what it means to be a human being. So a human being as an individual, as a biological living organism can survive. But there is damage that is done. And there is long-term damage, especially that is done to children, to their cognitive capacities in life, to their physical capacities. But there's also something that is done to the society, to the trauma, and a traumatization, a breaking apart of those key social bonds. When people are starving, they are required to do humiliating, dehumanizing things in order to survive. And if one turns to the accounts of the survivors of concentration camps in Nazi Germany, they will say, the German has two words. There's fressen, which is eating like an animal, like scrabbling for food. And there is essen, which is what human beings do when they eat as a family in a dignified way, celebrating their companionship. And companion itself comes from the Latin, sharing food together, panis com. So that is really what is being broken when people go are pushed into these situations, when they are forced to fressen, to eat like animals instead of to eat together like human beings. But what is particularly vicious, particularly cruel, is that the people who are undergoing this blame themselves. They do not blame that faraway perpetrator who imposed this on them. They're ashamed because a mother is ashamed. She bears the guilt of not being able to feed her children. The family is guilty because they are not able to provide for their neighbors. They're stripped of the privacy, of the humanity that makes our life meaningful. So I want to turn to how we can think about this in the context of the law. Now, the concept of genocide was developed by the lawyer Raphael Lemkin. And he spent more time attending to starvation and rations during World War II than he did to gas chambers and killing squads. And he gave a famous lecture, well, famous to the Ukrainians because it was about the Ukrainian famine of the Holodomor, in which he described Stalin's starvation as an attempt to break the spirit of the Ukrainian nation. And in his theory of genocide, he said the crime of genocide has two stages. The first is destroying the national pattern of the target group, and the second was imposing a new pattern, the pattern of the conqueror, of the colonizer, of those who intend to break that community, that group. So the people may survive as individuals, but the group to which they belonged previously, its spirit is broken. What made it meaningful is broken. Now, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide prohibits starvation in 4 different ways. In Article 2A, it prohibits killing. In Article 2B, it prohibits inflicting serious bodily or mental harm. And of course, the lifelong harms of starvation are thereby prohibited. I'll come to Article 2C in a moment. Article 2D, which has already been mentioned, prohibits imposing measures intended to prevent births. And starvation, as we know, prevents birth. Now, Article 2C is specified differently. It prohibits deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So why is this specified differently to the others? And I suggest that it is there because it reflects Lemkin's insight that it is the human life the meaningful ties among people that are being physically broken. It is the bonds of solidarity, of community, of identity, of love among people that get broken. It is by humiliation to the point of dehumanization. And we know that dehumanization and humiliation in this sense often goes along with the crime of genocide. In colonial war, the colonial wars which candidly used starvation also had the aim of breaking people's attachment to their land, attachment to their identity, of desecrating and destroying the objects that were most sacred to them. The targets are described as human, as animals, as subhumans, and it prepares the mindset of those who are inflicting the genocide, that the people they are targeting aren't humans. And then they will take the photographs, the imagery of people reduced to the state of acting like animals and say, look, see, this is what proves it. These people were never human. This was a very common trope in the colonial era. Now, in this regard, it's similar to rape. Rape enlists the victim's own sense of shame, her sense of guilt, and her society's values in denying her her humanity and her future. In a similar way, starvation weaponizes the humiliations, the self-reproach, the shame of its survivors in their own dehumanization. And just to conclude on this, and then I will open, and then I will hand the floor back. A note about the case before the International Court of Justice. So when the International Court of Justice accepted the genocide case brought by South Africa against Israel, it set in motion a very long and deliberative process. It's already almost 2 years, and it will probably be another 2 years before the court finally decides. And the threshold, the bar for finding Israel to be guilty of genocide is extremely high. And of course, the court has no power to impose a punishment. And many governments around the world have demurred on the question of genocide, saying this is for the court to decide. But recall the full name of the Genocide Convention, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Now, by definition, prevention cannot wait until the crime has happened and its character has been determined. So no state can demur on that duty to prevent genocide. The duty has been activated. It was activated when the court said that the Palestinian people of Gaza are in imminent risk of irreparable harms as enumerated under those items under the Genocide Convention. And the court then issued provisional orders that are binding on Israel. Let me just read one of them, which was issued on the 28th of March, 2024, when the court demanded that Israel take, and let me quote, all necessary and effective measures to ensure without delay, in full cooperation with the United Nations, the unhindered provision at scale by all concerned of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, including food, water, electricity, fuel, shelter, clothing, hygiene and sanitation requirements, as well as medical supplies and medical care to Palestinians throughout Gaza, including by increasing the capacity and number of land crossings and maintaining them open for as long as necessary. End quote. Now that order was passed unanimously because the Israeli judge on the court, Aharon Barak, voted in favor. To be clear, the court did not at that time find Israel responsible for committing the crime of genocide, but what it did was it specified an action that Israel needed to take in order that it might, at some future date, not be found responsible for genocide under the conditions of life provision of the Genocide Convention. Now, it's evident that Israel has not complied with this order and is still not complying with this order. And what its counsel will presumably argue at the court is that it will try and dispute the decision, the determination of the United Nations IPC, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System, that said that famine thresholds had been crossed. And it will, some of its argument is statistical contortionism and frankly is just intended to confuse. But even if it is referring to those long periods where the famine threshold, according to the IPC, including especially the mortality threshold, was not breached, it never at any point disputes the fact that one particular measure used by the IPC, which is the acute food insecurity measure, is at catastrophe levels for a very large proportion of the population. Now, catastrophe, of course, has a very particular meaning for the Palestinians. And here I think that we need to explain the specific meaning that it has in the IPC acute food insecurity index. What it means is people simply do not have enough food to maintain their normal, social, humane way of life. They are reduced to doing desperate, dehumanizing, shameful, humiliating things like eating animal food, like denying food to their neighbors, like scrabbling for food in the dirt. So Israel has never challenged that fact that the Palestinians of Gaza have been reduced to that state, the breaking of the social spirit. So it matters not, it doesn't matter under this understanding of acute food insecurity, catastrophe, starvation, or indeed under the provisions of life prohibition in the Genocide Convention, whether the victims live or die. It only matters if their human spirit is broken, if the community cannot function, and they internalize among themselves their loss of identity, indeed their loss of humanity. That's the purpose of genocidal starvation. That's why it has been inflicted by colonial powers over the centuries. It is to murder a society, even if those individuals continue to live as individual people, damaged though they will be. And that's the crime, that the world was notified. It is the duty of every state to prevent it. And the question that I ask is not, is it genocide? Is it not genocide? It is what we have done to fulfill that duty to prevent it from happening over the last 18 months, if not the last 2 years. And it is, I believe, an indelible mark of shame on those who failed to fulfill that duty. The shame does not belong on the victims and survivors. The shame must attach to the perpetrators and to those who failed in their duty to prevent the perpetration of this, the most heinous of crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I just want to touch on something that you said, that the colonizer will detach the population that it's subjugating from their land and from their objects and ultimately from their identity. And I feel like that encapsulated so well when we read the testimonies. That's the feeling that you get when you read them from the women who describe repeated displacement. And they describe how it's just displacement after displacement after displacement, and it just creates chaos and confusion. And ultimately, they just this loss of sense of identity that you described really came through in the testimonies. And just overall, how that adds to the breaking of the overall spirit that's in Gaza. All these factors have a play in it. So thank you very much for joining and for speaking. We'll open it up now to questions. Questions for all three of our speakers, for Shadia, Yazdan, and Alex. If anyone has any questions, please just raise your hand. Oh, Shadia's
Please
no
make
longer
sure
with us.
to give the chance for translation if the question is directed to our friend in
Okay.
Gaza.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Johara, and I also work for MIFTAH, for the advocacy team. My question is to Alex. And since we spoke extensively about the Genocide Convention, how the states have an obligation to prevent. Since that clearly hasn't happened, let's say down the road in a year or two, the ICJ does confirm that Israel has committed genocide. Are there legal repercussions for these states since they fell short of their obligations to prevent it?
Would you like me to answer that directly, or are you going to take several questions? I'm happy to respond directly.
I think we could do it question, yeah.
Okay. So the ICJ has no enforcement power. It's not like the International Criminal Court, where an individual is in court and can be sentenced. Its power is ultimately a moral power. It arises from the commitment, the fundamental moral commitment of member states. Now, so what would be the repercussions? And I think it's up to those of us who are engaged in this issue to begin to develop that agenda. What would be the demands on the state of Israel and all other states should the court find that it's genocide, or indeed that in finding that it's something slightly short of genocide, nonetheless say such and all these particular acts have happened. And what orders might the court then give? And when we think of justice, we tend to think of punitive justice, bringing perpetrators to court, and that may be important. But there's also restorative justice. What are the obligations on those who are both perpetrators and bystanders, maybe complicit bystanders, even those bystanders who are not complicit, to provide reparations, to provide support, to provide lifelong assistance to those who have been irreparably harmed in body, mind, and spirit by this, to try to restore some of what has been lost. And there are some interesting precedents that one can look into about how states that have been responsible for these kinds of acts in the past have felt it necessary to provide reparations and provide assistance. This is an agenda that is entirely open, and one I think that we should begin to work upon.
Hello. So I'll start speaking in Arabic. Maybe Shadia will be there. تحكي شكرا كتير إلك شادية. يعني شهادتك كانت جدا مؤثرة بتذكر لما خلال حرب
محتاجة
الإبادة
لترجمة؟ نترجم ولا لا؟ ألو؟
لا
نترجم؟
شادية
عشان الناس بالإنجليزي يا ريت.
Okay. There's a message here to Shadia, so she will speak in Arabic.
اوكي
Yes.
سو مرحبا شادية. بتذكر أول شي بحكي شهادتك يعني كانت جدا مؤثرة
Hello, Shadia. Your testimonial was really moving.
كحدا يعني عم بيوثق وفي نفس الوقت عايش هاي الحالة، جدا صعب إنك توصفي من تجربتك وتجربة كل النساء والأطفال كل الناس اللي عاشوا في غزة هاي المجاعة يعني وهذه الحرب الإبادة.
As a person documenting and living that situation, it is really difficult for you to describe the suffering of women, children, and so on in light of this starvation and genocide.
في نفس الوقت أنا بدي أحيي صمودك وأشكرك إنه كمان في ظل هاي الإبادة يعني ما يعني ولا مرة تونيتي عن إنه تقدمي المساعدة. يعني أنا شخصيا تواصلت معاكي، بعرفش إذا بتتذكري أو لا، بخصوص إشي بيتعلق في التعليم في غزة واتحاد الطلبة طلبة الجامعات، وكنت يعني خير مساعد لهذا الموضوع. فأنا يعني بحييكي وبحيي صمودك وصمود كل أهل غزة.
At the same time, I would like to salute you for your great resilience, which is impeccable, really, especially since you always extend the hand and help. If you may recall, I once communicated with you in order to receive help from you in the educational field, and especially with regard to the student union, and you were more than helpful there, despite your suffering. Amazing.
يعني ما فيش كلمات، بس كنت بدي أحكي هاي الملاحظة وأشكرك. سؤال كان لدكتور أليكس.
So I don't have more words to express because, yeah, but I just wanted to thank you so much. Yeah, Shadia. Now the question is to Mr. Alex.
So now I'll turn to English. Mr. Alex, I find it really hard as someone who have been working in the educational field for all my professional life, and just to see and witness this genocide live streamed, and like studying international relations. It's really hard to believe in international law anymore. I think the amount of hypocrisy in this law that was built on colonial rule and colonial power still shows us that it's really hard to change the system. We need to change it from bottom up. Yes, we still believe that people can change, but the whole system is built on just keeping the status quo. So how do you think that we can change that status quo based on the current situation? Also, I really find it really strange that we are thinking of I'm sorry, that the person that was here, about the quality of food entering, while there's like a million, like there's no food at all, like before the genocide, even like the amount of food that entered Gaza was only enough for them to survive. Now with the genocide, it's barely having food. So the starvation is still there. We, even under the ceasefire, there's not enough food that is entering Gaza. And with all these testimonies, we witnessed the genocide, but it's really hard to comprehend actually what the details, the little details that this is like reported in or documented in this report. Anyways, I just wanted to share this, and thank you so much, MIFTAH, for inviting us today and for all the work that you are doing.
So those are big questions. Let me just say one word about ceasefire. So one of the jobs that I used to have when I worked with the African Union was I was a mediator for a number of ceasefires. And in the technical language of a mediation specialist, what we have today is not a ceasefire. A ceasefire involves a whole set of activities that are prohibited and permitted. And it involves a monitoring, supervision, reporting, complaints mechanism, a third party, if you like, a referee. What we have is statements on one side, I guess on both sides, to what we would call a suspension of hostilities, without a proper mechanism for monitoring whether that is actually being respected or not. So recognizing that it is, what has happened in the last 6 months is not as grave as what was happening before. I would not personally or professionally call this a ceasefire. That's just one prefatory remark. So, but the bigger point is, yes, we have what was called the international rules-based order, and it was never properly respected. It was always rules-based order for some, and then not for others. So that there were when terrible crimes would happen in countries like Rwanda or in Sudan, there would be an international effort to say, let's enforce these rules. But there was no effort to restrain or to ensure that the great powers of the day, particularly the United States, Europe, and indeed Israel, would stick, especially Israel, would stick by the same rules. And now what we're seeing is flagrantly that era, which at least had the element of hypocrisy, the element of we have these rules, but we're not always conforming to them. That is now over. And what is quite striking about the current situation is the completely open, brutal way in which those who are inflicting these crimes brazenly celebrate what they are doing. So I also work a lot on Sudan, and there are these trophy videos of the killers celebrating, giving relish when they are committing murder and massacre. And we see, all these videos circulated by the IDF forces when they are in Gaza, where they are celebrating when they are blowing up buildings. They are just talking, openly about the humiliations, the crimes that they are committing. So this seems to be an era in which that element of relish in brutality is entirely permissible. Where I see some real signs of encouragement are that there is a very widespread revulsion against this. I mean, we see in the United States, I'm British, and I see young people are sick of this. And I see most of the rest of the world as also, not prepared to tolerate this. So the amount of international support that there is for South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice is very impressive. And that reflects a turning of global public opinion against this brazen impunity that appears to be prevailing today. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments? Yeah, so in the folders that we handed out, you will find a fact sheet based on the report we created, as well as a policy paper that kind of summarizes the report, and there is a QR code that will take you to the full report. But I think with that, we will wrap up. I'd like to thank all the speakers for joining us, especially the ones joining us from Gaza, Shadia, Yazdan. Thank you. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. Thank you.